Bet you didn't know I actually lived in Malaysia for 2 years when I was a kid, which means this book in particular, when I did book versus movie, was very special. Welcome to Christy Grace Scarlet Pen. I am an author, creativity chaser, and book lover, and I'm doing another book versus movie video. I am comparing a book to the movie of a whole bunch of books/movies because there was a lot more than I realized movies that were based off books. So I'm taking them one at a time, and I'm sharing what I thought, what the differences were, and which one was better. Today I am talking about the last book which I read, which is Crazy Rich Asians. My parents loved it. We lived in Malaysia for 2 years when I was a kid, and so they really liked seeing some of that culture in there. But as I read the book, I discovered some very big differences. Crazy Rich Asians is quite a long book, and so there was a lot of condensing for the sake of time. That always happens with a book versus a movie, so I'm okay with condensing as long as you do it well. There were quite a few differences in the book to the movie. They were actually quite numerous, the differences, and I'm probably just gonna have to take them one at a time. So I will do differences first. There were so many that I actually have a list, and I'm gonna have to read my list. I should probably mention there will be spoilers in this. If you haven't read the book and you want to, there will be spoilers in this video. In the movie, it seemed that everyone really sort of knew who the Youngs were. However, in the book, it is very clear that the Young family really wanted to be a secret. They didn't want people to know that they had all the money. They didn't want people to know who they really were. So actually, it was a really big secret as to who they were, which changes a whole bunch of things. Like with Rachel's friend and her family, in the book, they actually end up doing some minor investigative work to try and figure out just who Nick Young really is and whether he's good for Rachel and what have you. And so that was kind of a really different element, and that was throughout the book, that you got this idea of most people actually didn't know who they were, and that's how they liked it. In the book, most of the characters were actually really calculating and cynical. In the movie, a lot of characters were a lot more lighter. There was a few characters in the movie that were still like that, obviously, but in the book, it was just way more of the characters were like that. They were a lot, I wouldn't go so far as to say harder, but they were a lot more cynical and closed off and judgmental, I think, in the book compared to in the movie. I loved the character of Astrid in the movie. I think it was great. The storyline was really interesting, and she was a really cool character, really likable. Her storyline in the book was really quite different. The relationship drama was really, really different. In the movie, there was an affair with Astrid's husband, and that is why they sort of ended up separating and moving on from each other. However, in the book, there was suspicion of an affair. She was pretty sure. He even admitted to it to a point, and then shared with her that actually he faked the entire affair just to get away from her and her family because he couldn't stand it anymore. And there was actually even another guy who Astrid had been with before, actually had been engaged to before, and there was this other guy hanging around. In the end of the movie, it looks like they're going to separate permanently, but in the book, we see that Astrid really does love her husband a lot, and he seems to love her as long as there's not the barriers that he's been facing. So this sort of alludes to the fact that potentially they might get back together, whereas in the movie it is a definite split because there was a real affair. So that was quite different, and Astrid's view on this affair in the book versus the movie was also quite different. She was willing to overlook the affair in the book. Apparently that was really, really common with all these relationships. There was affairs that the wives just overlooked and move on with their lives. So there was quite a different dynamic when it came to their relationship and all of that drama that was going on behind the scenes. In the book, something I loved was that there was flashbacks of Rachel and Nick's relationship, of some other things. There was some really cool flashbacks we got to read. I think probably just time-wise is the reason we didn't get them in the movie, but they were really interesting. The bachelor and bachelorette parties for Colin's wedding, they were really different in the book. The movie's bachelorette parties were a lot better, I will say that. I think the bachelorette party was a little bit more similar. The bachelor party was so totally different. In the book, Bernard tried to get them to go and see I think it was a dog fight or something ridiculous. I couldn't, it was just crazy. And they ended up coming to Australia to get coffee, like just a couple of like the core people like who didn't want to do all the craziness. How Rachel meets and finds out about Nick's family was really different. I think a lot of the reason for that was to condense for time. And I see why they did that. I actually think the movie did that condensing relatively well. There were elements of controlling manipulative mind games in the book that weren't in the movie when it came to meeting and who was going to be there first and all this other drama. I actually think that the movie did well to cut that down and really condense that. So I quite liked that condensing in the film as opposed to the book, which sort of dragged things out quite a lot. The writing style for this book was really quite nice. I liked it. It was easy to follow. I loved all of the little, there was asterisks for certain Malay or Singapore slang or words that were used or food, which then put down the bottom to explain what that word meant, whether it was Malay slang or whether it was this or that or the other. And it was so much fun because I have so many, I have a lot of auntie uncles over in Malaysia because that's just how it works. So much fun to see things like saying la at the end of a sentence. It's just so, it made me so happy to see that. And the dynamics written were just so fun. It was so accurate. I'm reading these dynamics between some of these characters and I'm going, I have literally seen people act and react in this way to each other. It was so authentic. It was so beautiful. I just loved it. It was so much fun. There was actually a lot of head hopping point of views. There was sort of a main character for a chapter, but then you sort of got little bits of head hopping. Normally that's annoying, however, the way it was done was actually really well. I didn't mind the head hopping in this book. There were scenes in the movie that were added, that were nowhere near the book, but I didn't expect additional scenes to be thrown into the film. I'm hoping that the author had some sort of say over that, but the making dumplings with the family scene, the whole drama thing about the ring and stuff like that, none of that was in the book. There's no mahjong thing at the end with the mother and Rachel, none of that was in the book. There was a lot of differences in the ending. There was no final showdown with Rachel and Eleanor. There was no resolution really with any of the family and the family members. There was no plain proposal, no real proposal even, no proposal whatsoever. They get back together, which is good, and the way the book ends literally is Rachel's mother explaining about her dad and that past, and that's really how the book ends, of like, this is the surprise, which was a lot more complex, but that's how the book ended. The book ended with her explaining her roots and Rachel being really having to face that information, and it's really difficult, of course. But yeah, it was a really odd ending. I think that the movie ending was a lot better because you got a lot more closure. There was some sort of acceptance when it came to things like with the ring and Eleanor, even if there wasn't like, I don't like you, but I'm accepting this is going to happen. There was a finality for their relationship. He proposed. There was a lot of loose ends for the book, and they didn't really sort of close off a lot. I think in general, if you're looking at book versus movie, the movie was a lot more snappy, a lot more positive, and I feel like it was a lot lighter. There was nothing wrong with that sort of more cynical element in the book. There was nothing wrong with that. It fit well within the storyline that we got for the book, but I think the movie did well to have the essence of the book. So who wins out, book or movie? I think I preferred the movie for this one. I think the visuals were extremely satisfying and so beautiful, and it was really nice to see a lot of stuff in person when it came to especially the wedding, which incidentally was a little bit different in the book. She didn't walk on the water that they put down, and that didn't happen, but a lot of that was a little bit different. But it was really quite nice to see. I loved the book though, so don't get me wrong, the book was really great, and it was really fun to see all those little asterisks just to let you know, this is Malay slang, this is this type of food, you know, that was so much fun, and I just could hear friends of my parents and people I know just saying stuff like that. It just was so much fun. So I loved reading the book, but for me, the movie won out. What book versus movie would you like to see next? Let me know in the comments. If you wanted to check out my other book versus movies, there is a playlist you can check out. I'll probably link it down somewhere. It's been some really fun ones, and I have so many coming. Thank you so much for watching this video. If you like my content, subscribe, but otherwise, I will see you guys in the adventures.